This lecture video is on complete Keynesian model. Keynesian economics developed against the background of the Great Depression of 1930s. The British economist John Maynard Keynes was more heavily influenced by events in his own country than those in the United States and in other parts of the world. In Great Britain, the high unemployment began in the early 1920s and it continued throughout the decade of 1930s. This high unemployment in Great Britain created a debate among the economists and policymakers over the causes and the proper policy responses to such increased unemployment. This situation of high unemployment could not be explained by the classical theory, and the classical economists were not able to provide any remedy which could ease out the situation. Keynes pointed out that the high unemployment in different industrialized countries was the result of a deficiency in the aggregate demand. Aggregate demand was very low because of inadequate investment demand. Now, Keynes was of the view that the economic policies should combat unemployment by stimulating the aggregate demand. At the time of depression, Keynes was in favor of different fiscal policy measures. Particularly, the government spending should be increased on the public work projects to stimulate demand. More generally, the Keynesian theory was in view of using monetary and different fiscal policies to regulate and to stimulate the aggregate demand. The classical economist, however, was not in a position to offer any solution to this problem. Now, classical economists recognize the human cost of unemployment. For example, Alfred Marshall considered the different effects of unemployment on the laborers. But Marshall had little to say about the causes of unemployment. The classical analysis was hardly a basis for solutions to the unemployment in Britain in the 1920s. While Keynes favored the policies of stimulating the aggregate demand, there were some other parallel views also that argued against the Keynesian view. So they drew primarily on the classical analysis. Increases in government expenditure unless financed by money creation and thus changes in monetary policy would not affect either employment or the price level. So, if government spendings were financed by creating money, the price level but not the level of output or unemployment would be affected. In the classical system, output, employment and all the other real variables are supply determined so that there is no effect of aggregate demand. But Keynes was pointing out that this massive unemployment of 1920s and early 1930s could be reduced only through the policies which will affect the aggregate demand. Keynes pointed out that it is a flaw in the classical system that they didn't consider an explicit theory of the aggregate demand for output, and hence they didn't consider the role of aggregate demand in determining output and employment. In this lecture video, we shall be discussing the complete Keynesian model, which will consider the product market, the factor market and the money market simultaneously to show how the output and employment are determined in an economy. The Keynesian theory of determination of aggregate output and employment in an economy finds its fullest form in the complete Keynesian model. This model helps us comprehend why output or income fluctuates in short run in an economy. It helps us further to understand the nature of the policies to be adopted during the recession. The complete Keynesian model has two sides, the demand side that gives us the aggregate demand curve and the supply side which gives us the aggregate supply curve. The discussion on the complete Keynesian model starts with the ISLM model in the background, and then we introduce the labor market and ultimately we derive the aggregate demand and the aggregate supply curve. The aggregate demand schedule is by construction a relationship between prices and the output in an economy. In the simple Keynesian model, the aggregate demand schedule comes from the ISLM model. Therefore, the factors affecting the IS and the LM curve will be the factors determining the aggregate demand schedule. So, any change in such factors will shift the aggregate demand schedule and will bring about changes in an economy. The condition for product market equilibrium along the IS curve can be written as IR plus G is equal to S of Y plus T. I of R is the investment, which is a function of the rate of interest, and it depends inversely on the rate of interest. S of Y is the saving function, where savings depends on positively the disposable income. Government expenditure G and taxes T are assumed to be fixed in real terms so that they are unaffected by the price changes. Investment is determined in real terms so that once again they are unaffected by any kind of price change in the economy. Real saving too depends on income and hence will be unaffected by the price changes. Therefore, a change in the price level will not shift the IS curve. Let us now consider the condition for money market equilibrium along the LM curve. The equation can be written as M by P is equal to L of YR, where M by P is the real money supply and L of YR is the real money demand. In the Keynesian demand for money, the money demand depends on the real income and the interest rate. So here we have two types of demand for money, the transactions demand for money and the speculative demand for money, where the transaction demand for money will depend positively on the level of income and the speculative demand for money will depend negatively on the rate of interest. So here we get a deviation from the classical model, where the demand for money is only the transactions demand for money. So money as an asset is never considered in a classical model. In this model, the nominal money supply is exogenously determined. So any change in price would affect the real money supply. Hence, a change in the price level will shift the LM curve. Now we show the derivation of the aggregate demand schedule. We start from the ISLM model in figure 1. The IS curve and the LM curve initially cuts each other at the point O. This LM curve is drawn on the basis of a given money supply M0 and a given price level P0. The equilibrium rate of interest is R0 and the level of income and output will be Y0. In figure 2, we plot the aggregate demand curve. So therefore, corresponding to this price level P0, we get the income level Y0 at the point O. So therefore, O is a point on the aggregate demand curve. Let us now assume that price increases from P0 to P1. So the money supply, real money supply M by P1 falls and the LM curve shifts towards left. The new equilibrium is attained at point N, where the new LM curve is cutting the original IS curve. The rate of interest increases to R1 and the rate of output falls to Y1. Now in the figure 2, we thus get another price output point as P1Y1 or the point N. Now we consider further increases in price from P1 to P2. So M by P falls further, LM shifts towards left further so that we get the new equilibrium point at M, where rate of interest rises further to R2 and income and output falls further to Y2. Therefore, in figure 2, we get another price output combination which will be at a point on the aggregate demand curve, and this point is the point M. So if we join all these points M, N and O, we get the aggregate demand curve. So this aggregate demand curve is downward sloping, as is evident from figure 1, that as prices rise, the output and income in the economy falls. Since this aggregate demand is derived from the ISLM framework, therefore, any output level which is given by the aggregate demand curve will clear the product market and the money market simultaneously. The aggregate demand curve or the position of the aggregate demand curve will depend on the different fiscal policy parameters and the monetary policy parameters. For example, its position will be determined by the government expenditure, changes in taxes, or the changes in the money supply. Now we can show how the monetary policy parameter can affect the position of the aggregate demand schedule. Let us consider the effect of a money supply change. So in figure 3, initially we have the IS curve, the price level is P0 and the money supply is M0, so that we have the LM curve as LM M0 by P0. Initial equilibrium is attained at point M, where the IS and the LM curves intersect each other. Y0 is the level of output and R0 is the rate of interest. Now we suppose that the money supply increases in the economy from M0 to M1. Therefore, the LM curve will be shifting towards right for a given price level P0. The new equilibrium is attained at point N, where IS curve is intersecting the new LM curve. So the rate of interest falls to R1 and the level of income and output increases to Y1. Now from the figure 4, it is evident that when the price was P0, the money supply was M0, then we get the aggregate demand curve as AD0. Now, as there is a change in the money supply, or to be very specific, there is an increase in the money supply from M0 to M1, then at the same price level P0, the level of income and output rises from Y0 to Y1. So this implies that as the money supply increases, then the aggregate demand curve shifts towards right for the same price level. So the reverse will be true if there is a decrease in the money supply. So then the aggregate demand schedule will be shifting towards left, so that at the given price level the level of output and income will fall. Any change in fiscal policy parameter will also change the aggregate demand schedule. Let us now consider the effect of the rise in the government expenditure or a cut in the tax rate. So in figure 5, the initial IS curve is given as IS0, the money supply is M0, price level is P0, therefore we get the LM curve as LM M0 by P0. New equilibrium is attained at point M, so that the rate of interest is R0 and equilibrium income is Y0. Now suppose the government decides to increase the government expenditure, or there is a cut in the taxes. So since these are expansionary fiscal policy, so the IS curve will be shifting towards right from IS0 to IS1. New equilibrium is attained at point N, where at the given price level P0, R increases to R1 and income increases to Y1. Now we come to the figure 6, which says that AD0 is the initial aggregate demand curve when price level was P0, money supply was M0, and the government expenditure and the taxes were at the initial position. Now as the IS curve shifts towards right because of an expansionary fiscal policy, then at the same price level Y0 changes to Y1. So the aggregate demand curve will be shifting towards right. So therefore the effect of any expansionary fiscal policy will be shifting the aggregate demand curve to the right. So the reverse is also true. Any contractionary fiscal policy will shift the aggregate demand curve towards the left. So that is how the fiscal policy and the monetary policy parameters will be having their impact on the aggregate demand curve. After the derivation of the aggregate demand curve, it is necessary to derive the aggregate supply curve to get the equilibrium in the complete Keynesian model. So, in order to derive the aggregate supply curve, we need to introduce the labor market along with the product and the money market. So, let us start with some assumptions. There are a large number of firms producing goods and services using capital and labor. In this model, the focus is on the short run, therefore capital is fixed. So, in the production function, we have two factors of production, labor and capital, where capital is fixed at some level K bar and labor is the variable factor of production. The product and the labor markets are perfectly competitive and the firms are price takers. Now, Keynes accepted the classical labor supply function but only as a notional supply curve. So, it is a supply curve that the workers want to attain but they cannot attain that. In the classical model, the labor supply and the labor demand functions are functions of real wage rate. So, money wage rates are perfectly flexible and same is for the prices. Real wage rate in the classical model cannot exceed the full employment level. So, if there is any excess supply of labor, money wage rate will automatically fall and hence the real wage rate will fall if the prices are given, so that this full employment will automatically be guaranteed in the classical model. Now, Keynes conjectured that the money wage rate does not adjust sufficiently to ensure the full employment. So, either it is completely rigid or it is at least inflexible downwards so that it is sticky. So, equilibrium with excess supply of labor or involuntary unemployment may be attained in the simple Keynesian model, whereas in the classical model, any kind of unemployment was voluntary in nature, so that it cannot explain the involuntary or the presence of involuntary unemployment given the perfect flexibility of all wages and prices. So, let us now see how this aggregate supply will be derived in the complete Keynesian model. In the complete Keynesian model, the money wage rates are rigid downwards or they are sticky for various reasons, and we may discuss some of these reasons. As pointed out by Keynes, that workers are interested in their relative as well as the absolute wages. Now, in the market, there will be different groups of laborers with different skills and different types of efficiency, so that there will be a set of wage differentials existing in the market. Now, most of the wage bargaining in the complete Keynesian model will be done to arrive at a relative wage structure which is acceptable to all types of labor and the management. Now, these wage differentials can be measured by relative money wage rate because price level changes will affect all the wages in a similar fashion. Now, Keynes was of the opinion that laborers would resist the money wage cut even as the demand for labor decreases, because wage cuts as they treat it will be unfair changes in the structure of the relative wages. Now, workers in any one sector or any one industries get no assurance that if the money wage cut is implemented in a particular sector, then the workers in the other sectors will be experiencing the same money wage cut. So, if the money wage cut is asymmetric, then one group of workers will be relatively worse off. So, a decline in the real wage rate as a result of rise in prices would not be treated as harmful by the workers, because they will be affecting the all the wage groups or all the laborer groups similarly. So that is not going to affect the structure of the relative wages. So for this reason, Keynes was of the opinion that if the real wage decreases because of the inflationary pressure, then that is not resisted by the workers. But if the real wage rate falls because of the fact that money wage rate is changing, then that will be met with severe resistance. Now, money wage rates may be sticky for institutional factors also. In some markets, there are trade unions, then the money wages are set by the labor contracts. The contracts will last for a relatively longer period of time, maybe for 3 to 4 years, and over this period, the money wage rate cannot be changed. Now, the point is, once the labor contract is signed, then the supply curve will lose all of its significance for the employment determination. So it is the demand for labor that will be deriving the optimum employment in the economy. Now, in absence of any explicit labor market contract also, money wage rate may be rigid. So, implicit agreement might exist between the employer and the employee to keep the wage rate fixed over certain years. So, in that case of implicit contract also, the money wage rate will be fixed at least for some short period of time. In presence of only implicit labor contract or in absence of any explicit labor contract, the money wage rate will be actually fixed in real life cases, because the firms might hire laborers at some lower wage rate, but that will affect the reputation of the firm and that will affect the employer-employee relationship also. The firms in real life will not be interested in doing such things because they are not interested to lose their reputation, or they are not also interested to affect the employer-employee relationship, because the money wage cut will give them only a short-term gain. But if the reputation is harmed or if the workplace environment is vitiated, then there will be a long-term loss which may not be, or rather long-term loss or damage which may be dangerous for the future of the firm. Keynesians also believe that the conventions of labor market are such that firms will find it more desirable to cut the length of the work week or to have layoffs in response to a fall in demand rather than to seek the money wage cuts. Now, all these kinds of contractual agreements, be it explicit or implicit, show how the labor markets operate in the modern era. So this is completely different from the frictionless auction view of the classicals, where the money wage rate is perfectly flexible in either direction. So when there is a decrease in the demand for labor, then the money wage rate will automatically adjust downward in order to maintain the full employment. In the Keynesian labor market, first of all, we shall consider the demand for labor curve and then we shall derive the supply curve of labor. Keynes considered the classical theory of labor demand, and he believed that a profit maximizing firm will employ labor up to the point where real wage rate equals the marginal productivity of labor. Therefore, the objective of the firm is to choose that level of employment which maximizes its profit. The profit is given as the total revenue minus total cost. The product price is P and the output is given as F of L K bar. So, the total revenue is P times F. Labor is the only variable factor of production and W is the money wage rate. So, WL is the total labor cost and A is all other costs that will be applicable to the firm. So, therefore, the profit function is defined as P into FLK bar. So, PFLK bar is actually the output Q minus WL minus A. The first order condition is that del pi del L will be set to be equal to 0. So P into FL, which is marginal productivity of labor, minus W is equal to 0. So setting that to be equal to 0, we get P into FL is equal to W. The second order condition is automatically satisfied since FLL is less than 0 because we have diminishing marginal productivity of labor. The equilibrium condition thus becomes W by P is equal to MPN, where W by P is the real wage rate and MPN is the marginal productivity of labor. Therefore, a profit maximizing firm will employ labor up to the point where real wage rate will be equal to the marginal productivity of labor. Now, in the Keynesian model, we shall be starting from here but using a slightly different version of this equilibrium condition. So we rewrite it as W is equal to P times MPN, so that money wage rate is equal to the value of the marginal productivity of labor, or which is also called the VMPN. Now, this equilibrium condition is equivalent to marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. Now, W is the unit labor cost. So, if we increase labor by 1 unit, then our total cost will increase by W, which is the wage rate. Therefore, W is nothing but the marginal cost of production. Now, if we consider the VMPL, then marginal productivity of labor is the increase in output if labor is increased by 1 additional unit. Now, if this output is sold in the market, then the revenue that we earn is P times marginal productivity of labor. So, therefore, P times marginal productivity of labor gives us the change in revenue that is coming to the firm when it increases labor by 1 unit. So, therefore, in the equilibrium condition, the left hand side shows the increase in cost when the firm employs 1 additional unit of labor, and the right hand side shows the increase in revenue when the firm increases labor by 1 additional unit. So, this can be treated as the equilibrium condition. The diagram shows the demand curve for labor. On the horizontal axis, we show the employment, and on the vertical axis, we show the wage rate and also MPN into P0 or the VMPL. Since as labor increases, marginal productivity of labor falls, then the VMPL curve will be drawn as a negatively sloped line. Now, this line is drawn on the basis of a given price. So, if the prices change, then the VMPL curve will be shifting either towards left or towards right. So, let us now consider the given wage rate, which is equal to W0. Now, the equilibrium condition is attained at point E, where money wage rate is equal to MPN into P0. Therefore, we get the employment level N0. Now, we can change the level of wage rate. So, if it increases above W0, then we can get the demand for labor from the VMPL curve. If the wage rate falls below W0, then once again we can get the employment from the VMPL curve. So that is why this VMPL curve will be giving us the demand curve for labor. So from this we get the Keynesian labor demand curve in order to derive the aggregate supply. In the simple Keynesian model, the commodity prices are assumed to be fixed. With the prices fixed, any level of output will be supplied at the given price, so that the aggregate supply curve will be just horizontal or parallel to the y-axis at the given price level P0. Now, this is possible only if the economy operates with the excess capacity and the output is less than the full employment level. This increase in output will not lead to any increase in the money wage rate because there is significant unemployment and the economy is operating under the excess capacity. Moreover, as we start from a relatively lower level of employment, then increase in labor will not reduce the marginal productivity of labor. Therefore, W by MPN will also remain constant. The cost of producing an additional unit of output will also remain constant. So the aggregate demand will have some impact on output. So as the aggregate demand increases from AD0 to AD1, then of course the output will increase. So this case may be treated as the case of very short run where the prices are fixed. Let us now consider the aggregate supply curve in presence of flexible prices but the fixed money wage rate. So here we are considering an extreme version of the sticky wage rate where the money wage rate is fixed mostly in the downward direction. Now in reality, the money wage rate will respond slowly as conditions in the labor market change. So the fixed money wage rate is possible in the short run. Now here the labor supply curve will be horizontal at the given money wage rate as long as the actual employment is less than full employment. So in the figure the money wage rate is fixed at W equal to W0. So as long as the employment is less than the full employment level of NF, then the supply curve of labor will be horizontal and the supply curve becomes vertical as employment reaches the full employment level. So with the fixed money wage rate, employment will depend on the demand curve for labor. Therefore, N0 will be a function of the prices and the fixed money wage rate. Now, the workers cannot operate on their planned labor supply schedule if the money wage rate is fixed. So, as long as the employment is less than full employment, so it is the demand curve for labor which will be determining the actual level of employment. This may not be the planned level of labor supply by the workers, but in this situation that cannot be attained. But once the full employment level is attained, then the demand for labor will have no impact on the employment of labor or N0. Now we show the derivation of the aggregate supply curve using three diagrams. The first one, that is figure 7, shows the impact of a rise in price on the level of employment. The second one, or figure 8, shows the change in output, and in the third part of the figure, or in figure 9, we derive the aggregate supply curve. So let us start from figure 7. So under the fixed money wage rate but flexible price model, the supply curve of labor will be initially horizontal and then it becomes vertical at the full employment level. The demand curve initially is given as MPN into P0. P0 is the initial price. Now we suppose that price increases from P0 to P1 so that the demand curve for labor shifts towards right. Initially, the equilibrium in the labor market is attained at point M so that employment is N0. And from the figure 8, we see that employment N0 leads to an output level of Y0. Now, when the price level increases, the new equilibrium is attained at point N, so that employment increases to N1, and from the figure 8, we show that there is an increase in output to Y1. So, now we relate all these things in figure 9 to get the aggregate supply curve. So it shows that if the price level is P0, the income is Y0, and if price level increases to P1, then income also and output also increases to Y1. So if we join all these points by shifting the prices in either direction, then we will be getting some upward rising aggregate supply schedule. So as price rises, the total output supplied will also increase. Now the aggregate supply curve will become vertical at the full employment level of output. This is for obvious reason, because as the employment level reaches the full employment level, then by shifting the demand curve for labor, we won't be getting any change in the labor employment. Therefore, even if the prices change, shifting the demand curve, then employment will be remaining unchanged at NF or the full employment level of income, so that output will also remain unchanged at the full employment level of income. This makes the aggregate supply curve vertical. Therefore, in this case, where price level is flexible but money wage rate is fixed, then we get some upward rising stretch in the aggregate supply curve, and then it becomes vertical, as it is there in the classical model. Now we get the equilibrium in the simple Keynesian model, so that we have equilibrium with involuntary unemployment. Let us start from the aggregate demand, aggregate supply framework. These two intersect at point E1, so we get the prices as P star and output as Y star. As is clear from here that Y star is less than the full employment level of output YF, so that there is an output gap. The output gap is equal to the distance Y star YF. This Y star level of output is produced with the level of employment N star, as it is evident from the production function. Now, this N star level is attained by the equality of demand curve for labor and the supply curve of labor at the labor market. So from this labor market, it is clear that N star is clearly less than the full employment level of employment NF, so that this gap N star NF shows us the level of involuntary unemployment in the Keynesian model. So the money wage rate is given as W bar. Now from these three figures, we can also find out the rate of interest in the economy if we consider the ISLM model. Now, since at Y star AS is equal to AD, then at this level of Y star, IS and LM should intersect each other, so that we get the equilibrium at E2 in the product and the money market, and the corresponding rate of interest is R star. So that is how we get the P star, Y star, N star and R star in this complete Keynesian model if the money wage rate is fixed at W star. But here, as we have pointed out earlier, there will be involuntary unemployment in equilibrium. So this is actually a result which the classicals cannot explain. Let us now consider the impact of the monetary and fiscal policy in the simple Keynesian model. To start with, we assume that the government increases the money supply so that it considers an easy monetary policy. To start with, the IS curve and the LM curves are drawn on the basis of a given money supply M0 and the price level P0. These two curves intersect at point E0, so that output level is Y0 and rate of interest is R0. At this output level Y0, the markets clear so that aggregate demand AD0 and the AS curve intersect at the point M, so that equilibrium price is P0 and equilibrium output is Y0. Now suppose the government increases the money supply from M0 to M1. On the basis of a given price, LM curve shifts to the blue LM curve, which is drawn on the basis of the new money supply M1 and the price level P0. The new equilibrium is attained at point E1. R falls to R1, output rises to Y1. This is shown in the ASAD diagram also. At the given price level P0, output increases from Y0 to Y1. Hence, AD shifts from AD0 to AD1. Now, prices cannot remain fixed at P0. This is because at price level P0, there is an excess demand which is given by Mn. As there is excess demand, then prices should rise from P0. So it rises to P star where AD1 is cutting the S. As price rises, there will be some change in the LM curve also. It will shift towards left from LM M1 P0 to LM M1 P1 just because of the fact that given the money supply M1, price level has increased. So in the product and the money market, the new equilibrium will be attained at point T star, so that R star rises by some extent to R star actually, and the output level falls from Y1, it reaches Y star. So as there is an expansionary money supply, or as there is an easy monetary policy, then output will increase. Now with this increase in money supply, the prices will also rise, so that the initial increase in output cannot be maintained. But the monetary policy is effective because output will increase. But if the prices are fixed, then it will rise from Y0 to Y1. But if we consider all the markets simultaneously, then output cannot rise from Y0 to Y1. It will rise only from Y0 to Y star. Therefore, in the complete Keynesian model, the monetary policy is effective, but it is not as that effective as it was in the ISLM framework where prices were fixed. Similarly, we can consider the impact of the fiscal policy, expansionary fiscal policy also in the context of the simple Keynesian model. So initially the equilibrium is attained at point E0 where IS0 and LM, which is drawn on the basis of M0 P0, intersect each other. The rate of interest is R0 and the output level is Y0. So at this level of price P0 and output level Y0, aggregate demand AD0 and the aggregate supply curve is intersect at point J, so that we get equilibrium in all the three markets simultaneously. Now we suppose that the government takes up some expansionary fiscal policy which shifts the IS curve from IS0 to IS1 towards right. So the new equilibrium in the ISLM framework will be attained at point E1. So R rises to R1 and output rises to Y1. Now this is drawn on the basis of a given price. Therefore, in the aggregate demand, aggregate supply framework, at the price level P0, there will be an excess demand because the aggregate demand curve has shifted from AD0 to AD1. With this excess demand in the market, the commodity price must rise from P0 to P star, so that aggregate demand once again equals aggregate supply. Now as price level increases, there will be some change in the LM curve in the ISLM framework. So LM curve will be shifting towards left as for a given level of money supply the prices have increased, so that the new equilibrium will be attained at a point where IS1 will be intersecting the new LM curve at E star, so that the rate of interest rises to R star and output falls from Y1 to Y star. But of course, y star is more than y0. So from here also we get the similar result. In the complete Keynesian model, the fiscal policy, expansionary fiscal policy is effective. It increases the level of income. But the impact on income is less than what it could be in the ISLM model where the prices are fixed. Here we do not get the full expansionary effect because after the initial expansionary fiscal policy there will be some change in price, so that will be having some impact in the product and the money market. The LM curve will be shifting towards the left, so that output will rise not from y0 to y1, but it will rise by a smaller amount. Now we consider a more general framework where the prices are flexible and the money wage rate is flexible, so that the situation is similar to the classical case, but we shall be showing here that in the complete Keynesian model the situation will be different. The shape of the aggregate supply curve will not be vertical, rather it will be something different. It will be having some curvature. In the classical model, the labor supply curve is a function of the real wage rate. But in the Keynesian model, the wage bargaining, as we have seen earlier, is set in terms of the money wage rate. In the classical model, workers know the money wage rate and the prices, so the real wage is unknown. This is the case of the perfect information or perfect foresight. In the Keynesian model, the workers know the money wage rate only. Prices are not known because they are the future prices, and hence the real wage rates are also not known in the Keynesian model. So this is a case of imperfect information. The workers agree to provide labor service over a specified period of time through any explicit or the implicit contract. But the price movements over this period is uncertain because it relates to future. Prices are important, of course, because they determine the purchasing power of the workers. Therefore, the workers must have some estimation about the future price movements. So that is why they frame some expectation about the price movements in the future, and their decisions will be relying on these expected prices. Let us now see how these expectations are formed. The expectation function that relates prices P to the expected price PE may be described as PE is a function of P where P prime is lying in between 0 and 1. Now there are two extreme cases. Suppose P prime is equal to 0. Then the expected prices do not depend on the actual price level changes. This is called the case of complete money illusion. So this gives us the extreme Keynesian case, and the labor supply function will depend on the money wage rate. On the other extreme, we have P prime to be equal to 1. So here expected prices depend on the actual price level changes. So as the actual price level changes, there will be the equivalent changes in the expected price. So the workers do not suffer from any money illusion, or there is perfect foresight. In other words, this is the classical case that we considered earlier. The labor supply will depend on the real wage rate. So this is most appropriate in the long run, that allows enough time for expected prices to respond and adjust to the actual price changes. Whereas the first case will be applicable for the very short run period. In the intermediate case, we get P prime to be lying between 0 and 1, so that there will be money illusion to some extent. So the expected prices will be adjusting to the actual price level changes, but it will not adjust fully to incorporate all the current price changes. This is the case of imperfect foresight, and there is money illusion to some extent. The labor supply function will depend on the money wage rate as well as the real wage rate. So we shall now be showing how the aggregate supply curve will be varying in shape depending on the value of P prime, and then we shall be relating those supply curves to short run, very short run and long run. But how the expectations are framed in the complete Keynesian model? The expectation is based on past price movements, and alternatively they are called backward looking expectation formation also. In the complete Keynesian model, expected price in any period t or PET will be equal to alpha 1 P t minus 1 plus alpha 2 P t minus 2 plus etc. plus alpha n P t minus n. So that expected price in any period t will depend on all the past prices. So the prices adjust slowly to the past price movements. So Keynes believed that there is an inertia. Price expectations do not change in response to current change in price, so that in short run the expected price may be taken as constant, so that in the short run P prime may be taken to be 0. Additional information is required to determine the weights accurately. Now we may take all the alphas to be same, so that we can give equal weight to all the future prices, or alternatively we may give greater weights to the more recent price movements, or the reverse may also be done. So everything will depend on the workers. But as Keynes pointed out that this is actually costly to get information about the different factors which will be affecting the weights. So the workers' expectation can be represented by the simple equation as we are showing here. So here the labor supply function will be depending on the expected real wage rate, whereas in the classical model the labor supply function will depend on the actual real wage rate. Now, even if the money wage rate is flexible, the aggregate supply curve would not be vertical, and then the output and employment will not be completely supply determined. Aggregate demand will have significant role in affecting output, employment and other variables in the system. With the assumptions that lead to P prime to be equal to 0, we now consider the extreme Keynesian case and we consider the derivation of the aggregate supply curve. We start from the labor market, so that the demand curve for labor is given as MPN into P0. Initial price level is P0, the supply curve is NS, which depends on the expected real wage rate. The new initial equilibrium is attained at point M. The money wage rate is W0, employment is N0. Corresponding to employment level N0, the output produced is Y0, as is given by the point M on the production function. Let us now assume that the price increases from P0 to P1, so that the demand curve for labor shifts rightward from MPN P0 to MPN P1. The supply curve of labor will not change, because as we have assumed that the expected prices are not responding to the actual price change. So NS, which is depending on the expected real wage rate, will not be changing here. So the new equilibrium is attained at point L, so that the money wage rate increases to W1, employment increases to N1, and from the production function it is clear that output will increase from Y0 to Y1. So as price level increases, the level of output will also increase. This is shown in the figure where we have drawn the aggregate supply curve. Initially, the price output combination is given by P0, Y0 and the economy operates at point M. As price rises to P1, income rises, output income rises to Y1. The economy operates at point L. We can increase price further to P2 so that the demand curve for labor shifts towards right further. New equilibrium is attained at point S. Money wage rate increases to W2, employment increases to N2, output increases to Y2. Therefore, in the aggregate supply curve figure, the output price combination is given as Y2P2, so that now the economy is operating at point S. So if we join all these points M, L and S, we get an upward rising function which shows the price output combinations and gives us the aggregate supply curve. Therefore, in the extreme Keynesian case, the aggregate supply curve is always upward rising, which is very different from the classical case. For academic purposes, now we shall be talking about the two other cases also where P prime is equal to 1, the other extreme of the extreme Keynesian case, and secondly when P prime will be lying in between 0 and 1. First, we consider the case where P prime is equal to 1. So this will be the case of perfect foresight as it was there in the classical case, and we shall be showing that the aggregate supply curve will be vertical. Let us start from the happenings in the labor market. Initially, the demand curve for labor is shown as the MPN into P0 and the supply curve of labor is NS, which is drawn on the basis of the expected prices. Initial equilibrium in the labor market is at M, wage is W0, employment is N0, so that output is Y0. Now, as the price level increases from P0 to P1, demand curve for labor increases from MPN P0 to MPN P1. Now, as the price level rises, then the expected prices will adjust accordingly, so that PE0 will rise to PE1 and the increase in the expected prices will be exactly equal to the increase in the actual prices. As the expected prices rise from PE0 to PE1, the NS curve or the labor supply curve will be shifting towards left, so that new equilibrium will be attained at point L, so that wage rate will rise from W0 to W1 and employment will be remaining unchanged at N0. Now, as employment is remaining unchanged at N0, output will be also fixed at Y0. Therefore, as price rises from P0 to P1, output is remaining unchanged at Y0. We can consider further increase in price from P1 to P2. So, the demand curve for labor shifts towards right once again, and the expected price will also rise, so that the supply curve of labor will be shifting further towards left. The new equilibrium will be attained at point S, where the money wage rate will rise proportionately to W2, so that the employment will remain unchanged at N0. So, as price rises from P1 to P2, once again we get output to be fixed at Y0. So, this shows that with perfect foresight, or in the long run, we get the vertical aggregate supply curve, which gives us once again the classical case. Now, we consider the case of imperfect foresight, or the general short run model, where P prime will be lying in between 0 and 1. Once again, we start from the labor market. The demand curve for labor is given as MPN into P0, and the supply curve of labor is given as NS, which is drawn on a given expected price PE0. The initial equilibrium is at point M. Money wage rate is W0, employment is N0, output is Y0. Now we suppose that price level rises from P0 to P1. So this shifts the demand curve of labor from MPN P0 to MPN P1. Now here, since P prime is lying between 0 and 1, then the anticipation about the prices will be changing following the change in the actual price, but the increase in expected price will not be proportionate, so that as price rises from P0 to P1, then the expected price will rise less than proportionately, so that the supply curve of labor will be shifting towards right by a less than proportionate amount, so that the new equilibrium will be attained at point L. And since the shift in the labor supply curve is less than the shift in the labor demand curve, now the money wage rate will rise from W0 to W1, whereas the level of employment will rise from N0 to N1, and the output will also rise from Y0 to Y1. So in this case also, as price rises, then the output will also rise, making the aggregate supply curve an upward sloping schedule. Now here, if we compare the two cases, the extreme Keynesian aggregate supply curve and the aggregate supply curve under imperfect foresight, then we find that both the aggregate supply curves will be positively sloped. So one will be related to very short run, which is the extreme Keynesian case, and the aggregate supply for the imperfect foresight will be applicable for the short run only. So it's a general short run model. Now, given these two upward sloping supply curves, which one is steeper and which one is flatter? So that will be very important if you want to find out the impact of aggregate demand change in the short run and in the very short run, and if you want to compare the changes. So let us now try to find out that given these two S curves, which one is steeper. Once again, we come back to the labor market conditions. So initially our demand curve is MPN into P0, and price rises from P0 to P1, so that demand curve for labor shifts from MPN P0 to MPN P1. Now we assume that P prime is equal to 0, so that as price rises, then the expected prices are not rising. Therefore, the NS will not shift, rather the new equilibrium will be attained at point S, where the original NS curve will be cutting the new demand curve for labor, so that the money wage rate will rise from W0 to W2, and employment will rise from N0 to N2. Therefore, the level of output will rise from Y0 to Y2. So now we compare the two cases. So if we have the extreme Keynesian case, then as the price level rises from P0 to P1, then output rises from Y0 to Y2. But if the P prime is lying in between 0 and 1, so that we have imperfect foresight only, then we get increase in output from Y0 to Y1 only. Now, if we consider the two aggregate supply curves, then the position will be clear. So, as price is P0, then output is Y0 in both the cases. As price rises from P0 to P1, then for the extreme Keynesian case, income rises to Y2, and in case of imperfect foresight, income rises to only Y1. So this makes the aggregate supply curve under the extreme Keynesian case to be a flatter one. So that in the very short run, the supply curve will be relatively flatter, whereas in the general short run or with imperfect foresight, the aggregate supply curve will be relatively steeper. Now we consider the impact of changes in aggregate demand on the three different aggregate supply curve. So here we have three aggregate supply curve. The AS-LR, which is the aggregate supply curve that we get under perfect foresight. So it gives us the original classical aggregate supply curve, which is vertical. So that in the long run, there is enough time so that the prices will adjust, the expectations will be formed accordingly, so that output will always be fixed at the full employment level. In the very short run, where we get the extreme Keynesian case, then the price formation mechanism will be different. If the actual prices change, then the anticipated prices will not at all be changing, so that output will rise to its fullest extent. And in the general short run, there is imperfect foresight, so, and there is some form of money illusion, so that as the prices rise, the anticipated prices will be revised somehow, so that there will be some increase in output, but of course it will be less than what it could be under complete money illusion. So in this diagram, we have the three aggregate supply curves. AS-LR under perfect foresight, AS-SR under imperfect foresight, and AS-VSR, which is the extreme Keynesian case. The AD0 is the initial aggregate demand curve. So that initially the price level is P0 and equilibrium is M, so that output is YF. Let us now assume that the government takes up certain policies so that the aggregate demand curve shifts rightwards from AD0 to AD1, so that it is an expansionary policy actually. So here, as the AD curve shifts from AD0 to AD1, then it cuts the AS-VSR at point V, AS-SR at point S, and AS-LR at point L, so that in the very short run, output rises to the maximum extent, it increases to YVSR, and the price rises only to PVSR. However, in the short run, under imperfect foresight, the increase in output will be only YSR, and the increase in price will be much more than PVSR. So it is PSR. In the long run, there will be no increase in output. So output is already at the full employment level, and the price rise will be by the maximum possible extent, so it will be PLR. So therefore, under perfect foresight, the output will always be fixed at the full employment level. So aggregate demand will have no impact on the output level in the economy. So if aggregate demand increases, then there will be only increase in the prices. However, in the extreme Keynesian case where there is money illusion, then there will be aggregate demand will be having its maximum or fullest impact on the level of output. So increase in price will be much less and increase in output will be much higher. In the short run, actually, there will be some impact of aggregate demand on the level of output. So it will not be as great as what could be obtained under very short run with no money illusion, but of course some impact will be there if you compare it with the case of perfect foresight. But as I have mentioned earlier, if there is perfect foresight, then the aggregate demand will be completely ineffective to have any influence on the level of output. In the complete Keynesian model, we have made two types of assumptions about the behavior of the money wage rate. On one hand, we have assumed that the money wage rate is fixed, so that we got the upward rising aggregate supply curve. In the second hand, we considered the money wage rate to be flexible, so there also we got some upward rising aggregate supply curve. So now we can compare these two aggregate supply curve in order to find out which one is steeper and which one is flatter. To start with, we assume that the price rate is fixed at P0 initially, and the demand curve for labor is given as MPN by P0. So in this diagram, we consider two types of supply curve. The upward rising labor supply curve, which is drawn on the basis of the assumption that the money wage rate is variable. In the same diagram, we superimpose the labor supply curve, which is drawn under the assumption of fixed money wage rate. So this labor supply curve, as discussed earlier, will be horizontal till the actual employment is less than the full employment, and then it becomes vertical once the full employment level is reached. If the money wage rate is fixed at W0, then actual employment will be determined by the demand curve for labor. Therefore, we get the equilibrium at point E, so that the money wage rate is W0, which is fixed, and the employment is N0. So when the money wage rate is fixed, we get the output level to be Y0 when the price is P0. Now we consider the equilibrium when the money wage rate is variable. So by virtue of our drawing, the equilibrium once again is attained at point E, so that the money wage rate is W0 and the employment is N0, so that when price is P0, the output produced under both the assumptions will be, or under both the labor supply curves will be Y0. Now we assume that the price level increases from P0 to P1. Therefore, the demand curve for labor increases from MPN P0 to MPN P1. Now it cuts the horizontal stretch of the labor supply curve at point M. Therefore, when the money wage rate is fixed, the new equilibrium will be shifted towards point M. The employment increases to N2. Now this N2 is once again less than the full employment level of labor. Now under this assumption, then the output level will be Y2 and price level is P1. If the money wage rate is variable, then M is not the equilibrium after the price increase. So that we shall be getting the new equilibrium at point L, when money wage rate increases to W1 and the employment will rise only up to N1 and not up to N2. Now N1 once again is less than the full employment level of labor. Now corresponding to this N1, the output produced will be Y1. So if we now compare the two aggregate supply curves, we shall be finding out that under the assumption of the fixed money wage rate, the aggregate supply curve will be relatively flatter, and under the assumption of the variable money wage rate, the aggregate supply curve will be steeper, because as price increases from P0 to P1, the increase in output will be much more in the context of fixed money wage rate, but it will be relatively lesser under the assumption of the variable money wage rate. This is particularly true because as the money wage rate is fixed, it is the demand for labor which will be determining the actual level of employment. But if the money wage rate is variable, then the demand of labor and the supply of labor, these two will interact with each other in order to determine the money wage rate and the level of employment. So as the demand for labor rises because of the price of the commodity increases, then the money wage rate must increase, and as the money wage rate increases, then the employment made by the firm will be reducing, so that the increase in output will be lesser under the assumption of the variable money wage rate. Now, if we consider the increase in some aggregate demand, so if the government takes up certain expansionary fiscal policy or if it takes some easy monetary policy, then the impact will also be different under the two assumptions. So, as the aggregate demand shifts towards right, then the increase in income will be much more under the assumption of the fixed money wage rate, and the reason will be obvious because the aggregate supply curve under the fixed money wage rate is relatively flatter. We may now consider the effectiveness of monetary and fiscal policy in the same way as was done in the earlier context. The expansionary monetary policy is once again effective. So, if the government expands the money supply, then it shifts the LM curve and output rises. Now, as the LM curve is shifted, then at the same price level, aggregate demand will be shifting towards the right, so that prices will ultimately rise. This increase in price will shift the LM curve towards left. This leftward shift in the LM curve will partly offset the initial increase in output and employment, so that finally output will rise, but it would have been increased more if the prices were fixed. The same analysis is done in the context of the fiscal policy. An expansionary fiscal policy shifts the IS curve towards right, so this increases the level of output. So, in the aggregate demand, aggregate supply context, at the given price level, this increases the aggregate demand. So, there is an excess demand, so price rises. This shifts LM curve towards left. This leftward shift in the LM curve will once again reduce part of the original increase in output. Therefore, the expansionary fiscal policy will be effective, no doubt, but the effectiveness would be more if we consider only the ISLM framework and we just do not consider the labor market. Therefore, in the simple Keynesian model, the effectiveness of the monetary and the fiscal policy will be reduced to some extent if we compare it with the ISLM model. In the complete Keynesian model, the output and employment effects of changes in aggregate demand given by shifts in the aggregate demand schedule will depend on the slope of the aggregate supply schedule. Supply factors would have an independent role in determining the output and the employment. Such supply factors will shift the aggregate supply schedule. Such shifts will affect the output, employment as well as the price level. Now, the shifts in aggregate supply schedule has some important role to play in the Keynesian model also. In fact, if we do not consider the shifts in the aggregate supply schedule, then the behavior of price, output and unemployment during some specific period cannot be explained in the Keynesian framework. One such period was the decade of 1970s, which was typically marked by supply shocks. In presence of supply shock, we cannot explain the movement in prices and output using the changes in aggregate demand only. For example, in 1970s, the US economy faced inflation as well as recessions. This type of situation cannot be explained until and unless we consider explicitly the supply shocks and their impacts on the aggregate supply curves. So, now we shall be talking about the supply shock or the supply impetus and their impacts on the aggregate supply curves. The points on the aggregate supply schedule show the desired output of the firm for each aggregate price level. Each firm, and therefore all the firms in aggregate, will choose the level of output that maximizes profit. This implies that the firms will be producing up to the point where the price level is equal to the marginal cost of production. In our analysis, labor is the only variable factor of production. So as discussed earlier, the marginal cost of producing an additional unit of output was money wage rate divided by the marginal productivity of labor. Moreover, in the variable money wage version of the simple Keynesian model, the workers would supply additional labor only if the money wage rate increases. So this is a factor which will cause the marginal cost to rise as the output increased. So these two factors, the declining marginal productivity of labor and the increasing upward pressure on money wage rate as output and employment increase, will show us that why the aggregate supply schedule is upward rising. In the first diagram, we consider the supply side shock, so that the aggregate supply curve shifts towards left. Given the aggregate demand, the equilibrium point shifts from point E0 to point E1. Therefore, in the economy, the level of output falls and the price level rises, so that following the supply side shock, there is inflation in the economy and there is a recession. So any factor that will increase the marginal cost of production will be shifting the aggregate supply curve towards left and will come as a supply side shock. As the marginal cost of production increases, then the producers will be reducing their level of output, so that at the initial level of price P0, there will be an excess demand. So given this excess demand, the prices will be rising, so that there will be inflationary pressure in the economy. The factors that will be affecting this marginal cost, or rather that will be increasing this marginal cost, are called usually the cost push factors, because they will be affecting the prices without any change in the level of demand, because such cost push factors will be shifting the aggregate supply schedule. There may be many different types of cost push factors. So in our analysis, we shall be talking about only one type of a cost push factor. Now, apart from this supply side shock, there may be supply side impetus also, the impact of which is considered in the second diagram. There, the aggregate demand curve is given by AD and the initial aggregate supply curve is given by AS0. Initial equilibrium is attained at E0. Now we suppose that there are certain supply side impetus, so that actually reduces the marginal cost of production. So then the producers will be increasing their output because their supply curve will be shifting towards right. New equilibrium will be reached at point E1. So that prices will be falling from T0 to P1 and output will increase from Y0 to Y1. Therefore, in case of a supply side impetus, the output will increase in the economy and there will be a fall in the general price level. First, we shall be considering one such factor which will act as a supply side impetus by reducing the marginal cost of production. Specifically, we shall be talking about the technological progress. By technological progress, we mean a situation where the same level of output can be produced by using relatively lesser amount of input, or the same combination of input or the same amount of input can produce a greater level of output. Technological progress will appear as a supply side impetus. To start with, let us assume that the production function is given as F0. Initially, output produced is Y0 and the level of employment is N0. Now suppose there is a technological progress in the economy so that the level of employment N0 can produce a relatively higher level of output, which is Y1, so that the production function will shift upward from F0 to F1. The new production point is identified as point M on the new production function F1, so that employment of N0 produces the higher output level Y1. Now, this technological progress has no impact on the level of prices in the economy. Therefore, at the same price level, let it be P0, the impact of technological progress will be like to increase the level of output from Y0 to Y1, so that the aggregate supply curve will be shifting from AS0 to AS1. So, this rightward shift in the aggregate supply curve coming from the technological progress will imply that the technological progress will be acting like a supply side impetus. Finally, we shall be considering one factor which will be leading to a supply side shock. In fact, there are many factors which will be leading to such shocks. Any factor which will be increasing the marginal cost of production, be it price of raw material, the money wage rate, or anything similar, will always lead to a supply side shock. Here we are considering one such factor, which is the increase in the expected price by the workers in the model. Workers' expected price level depend on the past behavior of prices, and hence that was given in the short run. However, over time, as new information is received, then the workers will adjust their price expectations. Let us start from the conditions in the labor market. Initially, the demand for labor is given by MPN into P0. The supply curve of labor is NS0, which is based on a given level of price expectation PE0. Initial equilibrium is at E, money wage rate is W0, employment is N0, and the output level is Y0. Now we suppose that the expectation about the prices change, but with no change in the actual price level. So this will shift the NS curve towards left, so that at the initial money wage rate there will be an excess demand for labor. This is because as the expected prices rise, expected real wage will fall, and hence workers will reduce their supply of labor at the given money wage rate. Since there is excess demand for labor, then the money wage rate should increase and the actual employment reduces from N0 to N1. From the production function, it is clear that the output will fall from Y0 to Y1. Therefore, as the workers expect the prices to rise even with no change in the actual price level, the aggregate supply curve will be shifting towards left, so that this particular factor will operate as a supply side shock. So once we take into consideration the supply shocks in the Keynesian framework, then we can actually explain some of the phenomenon in the international market, such as the oil price shocks, the inflationary recession of the US economy, and many other cases where the impact on price, output and employment was coming from not the changes in aggregate demand, but the changes in the aggregate supply. The modern macroeconomic analysis is a synthesis of two quite different approaches. One is commonly called the Keynesian approach and the other is called the classical approach. The Keynesian approach is the product of the 1930s, and the classical approach is an accumulation and refinement of ideas developed during the previous centuries. Actually, Keynes's own ideas, as set forth in his revolutionary general theory of employment, interest and money, incorporated many ideas borrowed directly from the classical theory, as well as modifications of the classical ideas which he developed to replace the originals. Keynes felt the urge to integrate that which was new and original in his vision of the world with the theoretical ideas that he had inherited. Subsequent analyses have shown that Keynes may have exaggerated the conflict between his own approach and the classical approach that preceded it. it is now more clear than it was at first that Keynes's ideas relate to a special case of a more general theory which also embraces much of the classical ideas. In any case, the conflict between or the differences between the Keynesian and the classical elements and their ideas are now seen as less clear-cut than it was once regarded. The macroeconomic theories which are now widely accepted among the economists and the way they are taught to their students is basically a synthesis of the Keynesian and the classical theories. So this is often called the Keynesian classical synthesis. So in this lecture video, we have considered the complete Keynesian model in what way it is different from the classical model and in what way we can have the marriage between the classical and the Keynesian theory.